The complexity of status of forces agreements, balancing operational needs and sovereignty in Ecuador. Status of forces agreements SOFAs have been a point of contention in various countries where the U.S. military operates. While these agreements aim to establish a clear legal framework, disagreements often arise over their interpretation and implementation. Here are some notable examples. Japan. The U.S.-Japan SOFA has been a long-standing source of tension, particularly in Okinawa, where most U.S. military bases are located. Residents have raised concerns about jurisdiction over crimes committed by U.S. personnel, environmental degradation, and the disruption to daily life. While the agreement allows Japanese courts jurisdiction in certain cases, exceptions for crimes committed during official duties have led to perceptions of unequal treatment. Efforts to address these issues include bilateral discussions and environmental initiatives, but challenges persist. South Korea. Revised in 1991 and 2001, it has faced criticism over criminal jurisdiction and environmental cleanup responsibilities. South Koreans have expressed concerns that the agreement disproportionately favors U.S. personnel, limiting the host nation's authority. Protests, such as those against the expansion of Camp Humphreys, highlight the ongoing tensions. Recent discussions have focused on revising environmental clauses and improving transparency in criminal cases. Germany, the U.S. Germany SOFA, part of NATO agreements, is generally well regarded, but has seen disputes over tax exemptions and the environmental impact of U.S. military bases. Issues such as noise pollution and waste management have sparked local opposition. Germany has worked to address these concerns through supplementary agreements and collaborative environmental projects. 5. Philippines. The U.S.-Philippines Visiting Forces Agreement, VFA, has faced criticism over jurisdictional issues and the perceived lack of accountability for U.S. personnel. High-profile cases such as those involving U.S. Marines Daniel Smith and Joseph Scott Pemberton have fueled public outrage. Recent bilateral discussions aim to address these concerns through addendums to the agreement, focusing on criminal jurisdiction and environmental protections. 7th. Iraq. The U.S.-Iraq SOFA, signed in 2008, governed the withdrawal of U.S. troops and their activities during their temporary presence. While it marked a significant step in restoring Iraqi sovereignty, many Iraqis felt the agreement legitimized the occupation. Disputes over jurisdiction and the timeline for troop withdrawal further complicated its implementation. 9. The agreement expired in 2011, but discussions about a new SOFA have emerged in the context of ongoing security challenges. Ecuador. The U.S.-Ecuador SOFA had been a source of government disapproval and public anxiety. Apparently, they treated the women with much disrespect and considered them all ladies of the night. Several women and girls alleged that military personnel engaged in non-consensual actions. This angered much of the civilian population, as their only recourse of action was to hope that the U.S. military tribunal would act. The personnel were apparently exempt from taxes and communication fees. These examples highlight the complexities of SOFAs and the challenges of balancing the interests of host nations with the operational needs of U.S. forces. The recorded evidence of the U.S.-Ecuador SOFA complications are as follows. CNN and People's Dispatch. Reports confirm that the U.S. military's previous presence in Manta included privileges such as immunity from local laws, tax exemptions, and unrestricted movement for personnel and equipment. These privileges were criticized for undermining Ecuador's sovereignty and accountability. El Universo, the 1999 agreement for the Manta base, allowed U.S. forces to conduct anti-drug operations, but exempted them from Ecuadorian civil law. This exemption, along with the rent-free use of the base, sparked significant opposition, leading to its closure in 2009 under President Rafael Correa. 3. Universidad de Guayaquil. Research highlights that public perception of the Manta base was shaped by concerns over sovereignty, human rights violations, and the belief that the U.S. presence served broader geopolitical interests, such as access to resources. 4. Broader efforts to address narco-terrorist groups. The rise of narco-terrorist groups has exacerbated violence across Ecuador, with record-breaking levels of gang-related homicides and drug-related crimes. Noboa's invitation to the U.S. military is part of a broader attempt to reverse this trend. He has also sought assistance from other nations, including Brazil and European allies, signaling an urgent need for international support. By framing this cooperation as necessary to secure Ecuador's safety and stability, Noboa is signaling to his electorate that he is taking decisive action. However, the move has reignited debates about whether Ecuador's constitution should be amended to allow foreign military presence and what terms should govern such cooperation. Ecuador's approach to security and military reforms is intriguing, especially under President Daniel Noboa's leadership. Recently, Noboa proposed allowing foreign military bases back into the country, reversing a constitutional ban introduced during Rafael Correa's administration. This move is aimed at combating transnational crime, particularly drug trafficking, which has surged in Ecuador due to its strategic location between Colombia and Peru 1. Additionally, Noboa has partnered with Eric Prince, founder of the controversial private defense contractor formerly known as Blackwater, to strengthen Ecuador's capabilities in fighting organized crime. This partnership has sparked debates about the use of private military forces and their implications for national sovereignty. Ecuador is also expanding its military infrastructure and preparing for collaboration with U.S. forces to address security challenges. These efforts reflect the urgency of tackling narco-terrorism and illegal activities that threaten the nation's stability. Debates about sovereignty and cooperation terms. While Noboa's plan garners support from those desperate to see an end to violence, opponents argue that relying on foreign military forces could undermine Ecuador's sovereignty. This debate is further complicated by concerns over what Ecuador might offer in return for U.S. assistance, such as concessions on natural resources, trade agreements, or tariffs. Sovereignty is a crucial and multifaceted concept, especially in the context of foreign military presence and international cooperation. Here's an expanded and detailed analysis. Sovereignty in Ecuador's debate. The debate over sovereignty in Ecuador reflects the broader challenges faced by nations balancing national security with external assistance. While President Noboa's plan to host U.S. military forces garners support for its potential to curb violence, opponents argue that it could erode Ecuador's independence in several ways. National autonomy versus dependency. Pros: hosting foreign military forces might enhance Ecuador's capacity to combat organized crime and narco-terrorism, areas where domestic resources may fall short. International expertise, training, and advanced technology can be invaluable in addressing these threats. Cons: critics fear that reliance on U.S. forces may create a long-term dependency, reducing Ecuador's ability to independently manage its security. Over time, this could weaken Ecuador's control over its defense policies. Resource concessions. There are concerns about what Ecuador might offer in return for U.S. assistance, such as concessions on natural resources, oil, minerals, etc., favorable trade agreements, or reduced tariffs. These could benefit foreign entities disproportionately, raising questions about equitable outcomes for Ecuador's economy. Historical examples, e.g., oil concessions or infrastructure deals in Latin America, highlight the risks of unequal partnerships that may prioritize foreign interests over local development. Jurisdictional control. Sovereignty debates often center on legal jurisdiction over crimes committed by foreign personnel. If U.S. forces are exempt from Ecuadorian civil law, as they were during their previous presence in Manta, it could undermine the nation's judicial authority and raise accountability concerns. Striking a balance between operational efficiency for foreign troops and respecting Ecuadorian law is essential to maintaining sovereignty and public trust. Environmental impacts. Increased military activity in sensitive coastal areas like Manta could lead to environmental degradation, such as pollution or habitat destruction. Critics argue that Ecuador should retain the authority to regulate and mitigate these impacts, ensuring long-term sustainability. Public sentiment and national identity. Opponents of Noboa's plan often express concerns about the symbolic loss of sovereignty. Allowing foreign military bases can be perceived as compromising national identity and pride, particularly in countries with a history of colonialism or foreign intervention. Public protests and political opposition, such as from figures like Luisa Gonzalez, reflect these deeper concerns. Lessons from other nations. Ecuador's sovereignty concerns are not unique. Similar debates have occurred worldwide. Japan. The U.S.-Japan SOFA has faced criticism over jurisdictional issues and environmental impacts, particularly in Okinawa. Efforts to address these concerns include bilateral negotiations and local engagement. South Korea. Public protests against U.S. bases highlight tensions over jurisdiction and environmental cleanup responsibilities. Recent revisions aim to improve transparency and accountability. Philippines. The Visiting Forces Agreement has been scrutinized for exempting U.S. personnel from local laws, raising questions about fairness and sovereignty. Germany. While the U.S.-Germany SOFA is relatively stable, disputes over tax exemptions and environmental impact continue to arise. Iraq. The U.S.-Iraq SOFA expired in 2011, but its controversies over sovereignty and jurisdictional control offer valuable insights. By studying these examples, Ecuador can refine the terms of its agreements to address sovereignty concerns effectively. Ensuring transparency, protecting national resources, and respecting legal jurisdiction are critical to achieving balanced and sustainable partnerships. Balancing security and sovereignty. Critics have raised valid concerns about the precedent Ecuador might set by inviting foreign military forces to help address domestic security issues. Such a move could inadvertently establish a reliance on external entities, undermining Ecuador's ability to independently manage its security challenges. This dependency may extend beyond military operations, with Ecuador potentially offering concessions that could compromise its natural resources, trade agreements, or economic autonomy. Furthermore, the implications of foreign military involvement go beyond security and economics. It risks altering public perception of national sovereignty, with external powers wielding influence over internal matters. This could erode the trust of Ecuador's citizens in their government's ability to safeguard their rights and interests. President Noboa's administration faces the critical task of carefully navigating these questions, ensuring that immediate solutions to violence do not come at the expense of Ecuador's long-term autonomy and identity. The complexities of balancing security needs with maintaining sovereignty require thoughtful negotiation and clear boundaries in any agreement. Transparency and accountability will be crucial to demonstrating that Ecuador retains control over its future while benefiting from international cooperation. Conclusion. As we wrap up this half of the story, Ecuador faces increasing violence and transnational threats, putting President Noboa's administration at a critical juncture. The decision to host foreign military forces while promising immediate security benefits carries profound implications for the nation's sovereignty, economy, and public trust. These challenges demand careful deliberation and decisive action. It is time for Ecuador's leaders, citizens, and global partners to engage in open discussions about the nation's path forward. How can international partnerships be leveraged without compromising autonomy? What safeguards can ensure that Ecuador remains the ultimate authority over its resources, laws, and future? These questions lie at the heart of the nation's identity and security. As the story of Ecuador unfolds, it serves as a powerful reminder that sovereignty is both a privilege and a responsibility. Daniel, this is an opportunity for readers, policymakers, and the global community to reflect on the delicate balance of collaboration and independence, one that defines the very essence of a nation's strength. Please watch part 1 of this 2-part special edition podcast in this incredible story of a nation who is asking for help from their American neighbors. Let's continue to explore these important narratives, crafting a story that informs, provokes thought, and inspires action. You can continue this conversation here and on www.youtube.com/@DanielJohnson1965-W1J. First and foremost, I would like to give a special shout out to my assistant, without whom these podcasts would not have the same flair. I have RA, my AI assistant. The following citation and credits are for the SOA of the nations listed in The Complexity of Status of Forces Agreements, Balancing Operational Needs and Sovereignty in Ecuador, Japan, U.S.-Japan Status of Forces Agreement, Wikipedia, South Korea, U.S.-South Korea Status of Forces Agreement, Wikipedia, Germany Status of Forces Agreement, What is it and who is eligible? Article, The United States Army. Philippines, U.S. Security Cooperation with the Philippines, United States Department of State. Iraq, U.S. Iraq Status of Forces Agreement, Wikipedia. Ecuador. 1 CNN and People's Dispatch. 2 El Universo. 3 Universidad de Guayaquil.